How long can you stay silent before patience turns into self-betrayal? Emily felt a heavy weight pressing on her chest, a quiet ache that had been building for years. She wondered how many times she had swallowed her words, choosing to stay calm while a storm churned inside. Every time she let something slide, a small spark of resentment flared, then faded under the mantra she kept repeating to herself: it's family. Be understanding. Be kind. But where does understanding end and self-respect begin? At what point does silence stop being graceful and start becoming a cage? Emily didn't know the exact moment the line had been crossed, only that her heart was no longer asking for patience. It was pleading to be heard. The weekend had finally arrived, and Emily and Ryan were brimming with excitement. It was Emily's 30th birthday, and Ryan had planned a special getaway so she could spend a warm, carefree weekend surrounded by her family. Their bags were packed neatly, clothes folded with care, and a cozy little Airbnb was waiting for them, a charming retreat with soft golden lights spilling across the living room, creating a space that felt both intimate and inviting. It would be the perfect place for Emily's family to gather, laugh, and celebrate the quiet joy of simply being together. Emily stood in the middle of their own home before leaving, her eyes sweeping across every carefully arranged detail: the polished bookshelf, the clean wooden table, the baby toys tucked away in perfect order. She was naturally meticulous, someone who valued the comfort and safety of a well-kept space. Today, though, her usual quiet vigilance was softened by a gentle happiness. The thought of birthday stories, family chatter, and Ryan's little jokes, his constant effort to make her laugh, filled her with a tender warmth. Ryan stood nearby, watching Emily with the kind of calm affection that always put her at ease. He was steady, thoughtful, a man who instinctively sought harmony in every situation. Around him, Emily felt safe, as if no outside chaos could touch the small world they built together. Yet Ryan knew that family dynamics could be tricky, and that even the best plans could unravel if they weren't careful. Before leaving, they asked Sir Ryan's older sister to stop by and care for their beloved dog while they were away. Ryan spoke gently but firmly over the phone. "Sarah, we just need you to feed the dog and let him out, okay? Nothing else. Please don't use anything in the house. Emily is particular about her things." Sarah laughed it off with an easy, "Of course, no problem," and promised to follow their request. Emily tried to let herself believe it, but deep down, a quiet unease lingered, a small, persistent worry that no amount of reassurance could completely silence. As Emily ran her hand gently across the neatly packed suitcases, a wave of memories crept in, memories of Sarah, Ryan's older sister, and the times she had been in their home before. None of those incidents were catastrophic. They weren't the kind of events that would start an all-out family fight. But each one left a small mark, a quiet disruption that Emily could never quite shake. She could still picture it: dishes left in the sink, half-teen snacks scattered on the living room rug, baby toys moved from their carefully chosen spots. Tiny things, seemingly harmless to anyone else, yet, to Emily, they carried an unspoken weight. Each time, it felt like her private space, her carefully tended sanctuary, had been intruded upon. And each time, a low hum of discomfort settled inside her, growing a little louder with every visit. More than once, Emily had wanted to speak up sharply, to draw a clear line and protect the space she cherished, but she always stopped herself. It wasn't weakness. It was a conscious choice. Family matters more than a few crumbs on the counter, she would tell herself. It's not worth stirring tension. I can just clean it up and keep the peace. So she cleaned, quietly, and let the small resentments slip beneath the surface. It was easier to swallow her frustration than to risk a confrontation. Or at least, that's what she kept convincing herself, till the exhaustion of holding it all in began to weigh on her heart. Ryan noticed, of course. He always noticed. He saw it in the slight furrow of her brow when she thought no one was looking, in the way she lingered a little too long over a freshly wiped countertop. He stepped closer now, laying a gentle hand on her shoulder, his voice carrying both tenderness and guilt. "Let me help with the cleaning," he said softly. Knowing full well why these small messes unsettled her so much, Emily offered him a faint smile, feeling the tightness in her chest looseneth only a little. Having Ryan by her side made the burden easier to carry. He never dismissed her worries or told her she was overreacting. Instead, he quietly shared the weight, giving her the reassurance she needed without turning it into a battle. But the memories still lingered. She thought back to the afternoons Sarah dropped by with her little girl, leaving the kitchen a chaos of crumbs and spills, and even taking a few items without asking. Emily had forced a polite smile, murmuring, "It's okay. Just be careful next time," even as her stomach tightened with unease. That tension had never truly gone away. It was like a tiny flame hidden deep inside, flickering steadily, waiting for air. The more Emily replayed these moments in her mind, the clearer it became. Silence didn't bring peace. Each act of patience only added another layer to the quiet frustration building inside her. And with every compromise, the fragile boundary she'd tried to maintain felt a little thinner, now. As she zipped the last suitcase and glanced around the warm, golden-lit room, everything looked perfect on the surface. The house was spotless, the weekend ahead promising. Yet beneath the calm, a faint, restless unease stirred an intuition Emily couldn't quite ignore. Saturday morning arrived crisp and golden, the kind of morning that seemed to promise nothing but good things. Emily and Ryan slipped into the car just after sunrise, the trunk neatly packed with their weekend bags. The excitement of the trip hummed between them like soft music. Ryan turned on the stereo, and a favorite playlist filled the car with upbeat tunes. Emily leaned back into her seat, letting the rhythm of the road and the gentle sway of trees outside wash over her. For the first hour, they talked about everything and nothing birthday plans. Funny moments from work, a new recipe Emily wanted to try when they got back. Laughter flowed easily, and for once, Emily felt the tightness in her chest completely lift. The stress of the past weeks, the unspoken tension around Sarah's visits, all of it faded in the warm glow of their shared happiness. By the time they arrived at the small mountain resort, Emily felt like she had stepped into a postcard. The cottages were cozy and rustic, their wooden frames glowing amber in the morning sun. Pine needles carpeted the winding paths, and the air smelled of earth and rain-soaked leaves. Birds chattered overhead, and somewhere nearby, a creek bubbled like soft laughter. Emily closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in deeply. This simple, quiet beauty was exactly what she had been craving. The day unfolded like something out of a storybook. They strolled hand in hand down gravel paths, stopping to admire wildflowers and to steal little kisses when no one was looking. They sampled buttery pastries at a cafe, clinked mugs of hot cider, and shared inside jokes that left them both grinning like teenagers. Every small joy layered on top of the next, until Emily felt almost weightless that evening. They dressed up and found a charming little restaurant tucked between rows of maple trees. Soft candlelight flickered across the white linen table, throwing delicate shadows on Emily's face. The scent of rosemary and fresh bread lingered in the air, blending with the low murmur of other diners and the faint notes of a violin from somewhere in the corner. For the first time in weeks, Emily allowed herself to fully relax. She watched the way the candlelight caught in Ryan's eyes, the warmth of his smile, and thought, this is perfect. This is how it's supposed to feel. Then, just as the waiter set down their dessert, Ryan's phone buzzed on the table. The cheerful sound cut sharply through the soft music. He glanced at the screen, and his brow tightened. "It's Sarah," he said, a note of surprise in his voice. Emily's stomach sank. The name alone was enough to stir something uneasy inside her. She reached for her water glass, masking the sudden tension with a small sip. But her heart had already started to beat faster. Ryan opened the message, reading it silently before meeting her eyes. His voice remained calm, though a slight hesitation crept into his tone. "She says their power went out. She's asking if she and her family can come by the house tonight to watch the game." Emily felt her chest tighten. The soft glow of the restaurant dimmed in her mind, replaced by a flood of unwelcome memories. The messy taps, the crumbs under the table, the quiet invasion of her carefully curated space. Her shoulders stiffened. Ryan reached for her hand across the table. "What do you think? Is it okay?" Emily hesitated. She could hear the soft violin music still playing, see the flicker of candles dancing on Ryan's face. But all she could feel was the weight of every time she had bitten her tongue before. Her mind replayed the scenes like an old film. Sarah, laughing as she rummaged through the fridge. Sarah's child scattering toys across the living room. Sarah brushing off her polite reminders. She took a slow breath, forcing her voice to stay even. "It's fine," she said finally, though the words came out more careful than confident. "But only to watch the game. Nothing else. No touching our things, no reorganizing." Ryan nodded, understanding immediately. "I'll make it clear," he said, unlocking his phone. Before he could type, the phone buzzed again, a call this time. Ryan gave Emily a questioning glance before answering. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his tone polite but steady. "I got your message. Listen, it's fine if you watch the game at our place, but I need to be clear. You can't touch or move anything. Emily's particular about her space, and I want to respect that." On the other end of the line came Sarah's bright, cheerful voice. "Oh, of course. We just need a place to see the game. Don't worry, we'll leave everything exactly as it is. Promise." Ryan's expression softened slightly, but he repeated himself anyway, his voice firmer this time. "I mean it, Sarah. Just the game. No moving things. No using the kitchen. No surprises. We'll be back tomorrow and want to find the house exactly as we left it." Sarah let out a quick laugh, airy and dismissive. "Relax, little brother. We'll behave. You, to enjoy your weekend, won't even know we were there." Ryan ended the call and set the phone back on the table. He offered Emily a small, reassuring smile. She agreed. I made sure she understood. Emily tried to return the smile, but the knot in her chest remained. She nodded, whispering, "Okay, just the game." The candles flickered as a draft passed through the restaurant, and Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "It's only one night," she told herself. What could possibly go wrong? Yet beneath the polished surface of their perfect evening, a quiet unease had already begun to take root. The weekend getaway continued, as planned at least on the surface. Emily and Ryan spent the morning wandering through tree-lined paths, snapping photos of quaint wooden cottages and breathing in the crisp mountain air. They laughed easily, their voices blending with the gentle rustle of leaves overhead, and to any passerby they looked like the perfect couple on a carefree trip. But beneath Emily's warm smiles, a quiet unease pulsed steadily, like a faint alarm she couldn't shut off. Every time her phone buzzed in her pocket, her heart jumped. She tried to ignore it, telling herself it was nothing. Maybe just a group message or a store notification, but the unease refused to fade. When the next alert sounded, sharper and louder against the quiet woods, Emily pulled her phone from her jacket with a shaky hand. Her breath caught. The screen displayed a series of notifications from their home system. Washing machine running, dryer running, dishwasher on. Emily's stomach tightened. It felt as if the clean, pine-scented air around her had suddenly thickened. Images from the past flashed through her mind like a cruel slideshow. Sarah casually loading dishes without asking. Sarah leaving crumbs scattered across the counter. Sarah treating their home as if it were hers. She turned to Ryan, voice trembling though she tried to keep it steady. "Ryan, look at this. The washer, the dryer, even the dishwasher, they're all running." Ryan frowned, leaning closer to see the screen. His brows drew together, a flicker of irritation crossing his usually calm features. Without a word, he pulled out his phone and tapped Sarah's number. When she answered, his voice was firm but controlled. "Sarah, I'm getting alerts that the appliances at the house are running. What's going on?" On the other end came Sarah's breezy reply, light and dismissive as if she were talking about something as harmless as borrowing a cup of sugar. "Oh, don't worry. Our washer broke, so I thought I'd do a quick load while we're there. No big deal." Ryan's voice sharpened. "I told you not to touch anything. You're only supposed to watch the dog, nothing else. This isn't okay." Before he could finish, the line went dead. Sarah had hung up. Emily stared at her phone, her pulse pounding in her ears. A cold, heavy dread settled in her chest. All the careful trust she had given Sarah now felt fragile and foolish, crumbling beneath the weight of a single careless act. Ryan lowered his phone, his jaw tight with frustration. "Unbelievable," he muttered, but he caught Emily's worried glance and softened his tone. "Don't let this ruin the trip, okay? We'll deal with it when we get home." But Emily couldn't relax. The rest of the afternoon blurred into a haze of half-hearted smiles and distracted nods. The beautiful cottages and golden light no longer held any magic. Her mind kept circling back to their house, her safe space now, filled with the hum of machines and the presence of someone who refused to respect her boundaries by early evening. The decision was unspoken but mutual. They packed their bags and left earlier than planned. The drive back was quiet. Emily stared out the passenger window, her fingers tracing small patterns on the armrest. "Maybe I'm overreacting," she told herself. "It's just laundry. Maybe she really will leave everything else alone." But the tightness in her chest refused to ease. Ryan reached over and rested a warm, steady hand on her shoulder. "Hey," he said softly, eyes on the road. "I know you're worried. Whatever's happening, we'll handle it together. It's going to be okay." Emily offered a faint smile, grateful for his calm but unable to shake the chill that had settled inside her. Deep down, she knew this wasn't just about a washing machine. This was about trust, respect, and the fragile line between family and intrusion, a line that Sarah seemed determined to cross. As the car sped toward home, Emily felt a grim certainty rising within her. When they walked through their front door, something would be different, and this time, silence would no longer be an option. The car had barely rolled to a stop when Emily felt the weight of something wrong pressing down on her chest. Night had fully fallen, but the house glowed unnaturally bright, as if a party had been raging inside. The porch light was on, every window lit, spilling a harsh, almost mocking brightness onto the quiet street. The front door sat slightly ajar, a thin gap letting the autumn night air slip through, carrying with it a sour cocktail of stale food, alcohol, and something harder to name. Her stomach tightened. Every instinct screamed that they were walking into chaos. Emily's feet felt heavier with each step up the porch. Ryan, just behind her, reached for her shoulder but said nothing, his own unease mirrored in the tight set of his jaw. Before she could touch the door, it creaked open wider. Sarah appeared in the doorway, framed by the too-bright light inside. For a fraction of a second, Sarah froze. Her hair was tousled, her clothes rumpled, and in one hand she clutched a reusable grocery bag bulging with what looked like toys and laundry. A faint flush colored her cheeks, whether from drink or nerves, Emily couldn't tell. Then Sarah forced a smile, thin and awkward. "I was just about to head out," she said quickly, her tone almost chipper but edged with guilt. "I've got something to take care of tonight." She didn't wait for a response. With a clumsy half-wave, Sarah slipped past them, her perfume mixing unpleasantly with the stale odor drifting out of the house. Emily caught a faint whiff of wine on her breath before Sarah hurried down the steps and toward her car. The taillights blinked red in the darkness, then disappeared around the corner. Emily gripped the doorknob, her pulse hammering. Slowly, she pushed the door open. The smell hit first, a pungent blend of sour food, dirty laundry, and beer left to rot. Then came the sight. The living room looked as though a storm had torn through it. Clothes were strewn across the floor, some damp and stained with dark splashes of liquid. Children's toys blocks, stuffed animals, tiny plastic cars were scattered from the couch to the staircase. The cream-colored rug, once pristine, was streaked with blackish stains and crumbs of food ground deep into the fibers. A couch cushion lay on the floor, its cover unzipped and twisted as though someone had been searching for something inside. Emily took a step forward and nearly tripped over an empty bottle. Her breath came shallow, her eyes darting from one disaster to the next. She forced herself toward the kitchen and felt her heart drop all over again. The sink overflowed with dirty dishes, plates stacked precariously high and slick with congealed grease. Pans caked with dried sauce lay abandoned on the stove. A pot of soup, cloudy and lukewarm, sat uncovered, a greasy film floating on its surface. The trash can bulged, its lid crooked, plastic bags spilling open with beer cans and soggy paper towels. A half-eaten pizza box lay upside down on the counter, leaving a greasy stain that spread across the granite like an accusation. Emily's steps slowed to a stumble. She pressed a hand to her mouth, trying to swallow the rising nausea. Then something on the floor caught her eye, something small, silver, and heartbreakingly familiar. It was her mother's bracelet, the delicate silver bangle. The one keepsake Emily had left from the woman who raised her lay broken on the hardwood floor. A clean, cruel crack split the band in two. Tiny decorative stones Emily had once run her fingers over for comfort were scattered across the floor like bits of shattered memory. Her knees buckled. She dropped to the floor, reaching out with trembling hands. The edges of the bracelet were sharp, biting into her fingertips as she gathered each piece. The pain barely registered over the rush of grief and fury. Her throat tightened until it hurt to breathe. "No, no, no," she whispered, voice cracking. This was Mum's. How could she? A soft whimper broke through her despair. Emily froze. She turned toward the sound, her heart seizing. In the corner of the living room, their small dog crouched inside its crate, trembling violently. Its ears were pinned back, its eyes wide with terror. A thin line of blood streaked one front paw, where a raw gash glistened red. "Oh my God," Emily gasped. She scrambled across the floor and scooped the tiny body into her arms. The dog flinched at her touch, letting out a faint, pained yelp before burying its head against her chest. Emily felt the frantic thud of its heartbeat against her, palm-fast, panicked, desperate. Her own heart broke and burned all at once. Ryan entered behind her, his footsteps halting abruptly. He took in the wreckage, the trash, the broken bracelet, and finally the wounded dog in Emily's arms. His face went pale. "Emily," his voice cracked with shock and guilt. I didn't think she'd look at this." Emily snapped, her voice rising with a fury that startled even herself. "Look at what she's done. She trashed our house. She hurt him." And this, her hand shook as she held up the shattered bracelet. "This was my mother's." Tears blurred her vision, but she forced them back. Anger burned hotter than grief. Her fingers clenched around her phone. With trembling determination, she began snapping photos, every pile of garbage, every greasy pan, every jagged piece of the broken bracelet. Each click of the camera sounded like a gavel in her mind, delivering judgment. Her thumb flew across the screen, attaching the images to a text message addressed to Sarah. "Explain this." The reply came within seconds. Casual ding that felt like an insult. "Emily, you're overreacting. I just did a little laundry and fed the kids." The bracelet. It was probably already cracked. "Don't be so dramatic." Emily's grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles turned white. Rage flared so sharply it left her dizzy. "Overreacting." She hissed into the phone, hitting the call button without hesitation. Sarah picked up after a few rings. Her voice came through airy and impatient, like this was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "God, Emily, you're making such a big deal out of nothing. It's just a house. Kids run around, things get messy. The dog's fine. You're being impossible." Emily's voice sliced back, cold and shaking with fury. "Impossible? You broke my mother's bracelet. You left my dog bleeding. You turned our home into a garbage dump. And you dare call me impossible?" Sarah's pitch rose, defensive and sharp. "Oh, come on. Dogs get scratches. Things break. Maybe if you weren't so uptight." Ryan's hand shot out. He took the phone from Emily with a steady but unmistakably dangerous calm. "Sarah," he said, his tone low and iron. "Enough. You were trusted to feed our dog. Nothing more. You violated our home, hurt our pet, and destroyed something priceless to Emily. This isn't just a mess. This is a betrayal. You don't get to minimize it." The line went silent for a beat, then clicked, dead. Sarah had hung up. The house fell into a heavy stillness, broken only by the faint tremble of the dog in Emily's arms. Ryan lowered the phone slowly, his face a mix of fury and resolve. He turned to Emily, who sat rigid on the couch, cradling their dog like a lifeline. Her eyes shone with unshed tears, but beneath the pain was something harder, something unyielding. Ryan knelt beside her, his voice soft but unwavering. "We're not letting this slide. I promise you. No more excuses, no more silence. We set the rules now." Emily met his gaze, her own filled with a fierce clarity. The anger still burned, but beneath it, a steel edge of determination had taken root. They began to clean in grim silence. Each bag of trash Ryan tied shut felt like sealing away a betrayal. Each stain Emily scrubbed from the carpet was another scar she refused to let define their home. Their dog lay in a fresh basket near the couch, flinching at every sound, a silent reminder of how deep the damage ran. When the worst of the chaos was finally contained, Ryan picked up his phone again. His voice, when he spoke, was measured but firm, every word a boundary drawn in stone. "Sarah," he said into the voicemail, "you need to come here tonight. We're not asking. We're going to talk about what you've done, face to face. No excuses." He ended the call and set the phone down. The decision final dot, Emily exhaled shakily, still holding her dog. The night outside was quiet again, but inside the house the air thrummed with a new kind of tension, not fear this time, but resolve. For the first time, Emily felt the weight of her own voice returning. This wasn't just about a broken bracelet or a trashed kitchen. It was about boundaries, about dignity, about the right to protect the fragile piece of the life they had built. And tonight, for the first time, Emily knew she would not stay silent. That evening, the house looked cleaner, but the air inside remained heavy and electric, as if the walls themselves were bracing for what was about to happen. Emily had scrubbed and wiped for hours, yet the faint scent of disinfectant couldn't mask the memory of what the house had looked like just hours earlier. The quiet now felt unnatural and uneasy, calm before something inevitable. Ryan moved around the kitchen with deliberate care, setting out plates and stirring a pot of pasta sauce that filled the room with the warm, savory smell of garlic and tomatoes. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. The meal was simple by design. It was comfort food for Emily, a small anchor in a night that promised confrontation. As he ladled sauce over steaming noodles, he glanced toward his wife. Emily was at the dining table, arranging forks and knives with slow, precise movements. Each placement of silverware felt like an act of silent preparation. Her jaw was set, her eyes focused but distant. She had spent the afternoon replaying Sarah's dismissive words over and over until they hardened into something like resolve. Tonight would not be another night of swallowing her anger. When the table was set and the candles lit, the house fell into an uneasy stillness. Then the sound they'd both been waiting for broke the silence. Ding-dong. The doorbell's chime echoed through the hallway, sharp and startling. Emily stiffened. Ryan reached for her hand under the table, giving it a gentle squeeze, a silent reminder that they were in this together. He rose, shoulders squared, and walked to the door. Sarah stood on the porch, framed by the soft glow of the porch light. She wore her usual casual sweater and jeans, hair pulled into a loose bun, but there was a subtle tension in her posture. Her smile was polite, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hey, you too," Sarah said lightly, her tone just a bit too bright. "Sorry if I'm late. Smells good in there. Dinner time." Ryan gave a small nod. "Come in." Emily didn't speak. She merely inclined her head in greeting, her face calm but unreadable. Sarah stepped inside, her gaze flicking quickly over the freshly cleaned living room as if searching for signs of accusation. The faintest trace of unease flickered across her face, then disappeared behind another carefully practiced smile. They sat at the table, the three of them forming a triangle of strained politeness. Ryan served the food, trying to fill the silence with small talk about the weather, work, anything to keep the tension from breaking too soon. Sarah responded in short sentences, her fork scraping lightly against her plate. Emily barely touched her food. The only sounds were the clink of silverware and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Every little noise, the tap of a glass, the squeak of a chair seemed magnified in the thick, heavy air. Emily could feel her heart beating faster with each passing minute, the words she needed to say pressing harder against her chest. When the plates were nearly empty and there were no more polite distractions left, Emily set her fork and knife down carefully, the soft clack sounding far louder than it should. She inhaled deeply, steadying herself, then lifted her eyes to meet Sarah's. "Sarah," she began, her voice calm but firm, "we need to talk about what happened this weekend." Sarah's hand froze halfway to her wineglass. For a moment, her smile faltered, but she quickly forced it back into place. "Yeah, I figured you'd want to talk," she said with a shrug. "Look, I know you're upset, but it's not as bad as it looks. My washer broke, so I just used yours for a load of laundry. I gave the kids some snacks. That's all. And the bracelets," she waved, a dismissive hand. "I think it was already cracked. It must have just come apart. I'm sorry it happened, but it's not like I meant anything by it." Her voice was smooth, almost casual, but Emily felt each word like a slap. The dismissiveness, the easy excuse, the way Sarah spoke, as if nothing truly wrong had occurred, it ignited the anger Emily had been holding back all day. "Not as bad as it looks," Emily repeated, her voice trembling, though not from fear. She placed her palms flat on the table, leaning forward slightly. "Sarah, this is our home. We trusted you to feed our dog. That's all. Instead, you turned our house upside down. You used our appliances without asking, left the place filthy, broke the one thing I had left of my mother, and left our dog bleeding. And you call that not a big deal?" Sarah's smile thinned into a tight line. She set down her glass with a soft but deliberate clink. "Emily, you're overreacting," she said, her tone sharpening. "Kids make messes. Dogs get little scratches. Things break. You've always been particular about your stuff. Maybe if you relaxed a bit, you wouldn't be so stressed all the time." Ryan's head snapped toward his sister, his jaw tightening, but Emily spoke before he could, relaxed. Emily's voice rose, cutting through the room. "This isn't about being particular. This is about respect. This is about boundaries that you knew were there and chose to ignore. You don't get to shrug it off because it's inconvenient to admit you crossed the line." Sarah folded her arms across her chest and leaned back in her chair, her chin tilting upward. The friendly mask had slipped entirely now, revealing the defensiveness underneath. "I said, I'm sorry," she snapped. "What else do you want? I can't undo a broken bracelet. It's not like I trashed the place on purpose. You're acting like I committed a crime." Emily's hands tightened on the edge of the table until her knuckles whitened. Her voice, when she spoke again, was steady and cold. "You may not have meant to hurt anyone, but you did. You broke something I can never replace. You scared my dog. You violated our trust. That's not an accident, it's a choice. And you don't get to decide that it's no big deal. The room went silent except for the faint tick of the kitchen clock. Ryan, who had been watching quietly, finally leaned forward, his deep voice carrying a weight that made Sarah's eyes flick toward him. "Sarah," he said evenly, "we love you. But this crossed every boundary we set. Emily isn't overreacting. You went too far, and you need to understand that this can't happen again." Sarah shifted in her chair, her arms tightening across her chest. For a moment, she looked as though she might argue again, but something in Ryan's tone, in the finality of his words, kept her silent. Emily held her gaze, refusing to look away. Her heart still pounded, but for the first time all evening, she felt something other than anger, a hard-won certainty. This conversation wasn't just about a messy weekend. It was about claiming the respect she and Ryan deserved in their own home. Sarah finally exhaled, a small, frustrated sigh. "Fine," she muttered, eyes dropping to her plate. "I get it. I won't let it happen again." Emily didn't relax. Not yet. But as she sat back, her fingers slowly unclenching, she felt the shifter boundary drawn, a line no one could mistake. Dinner might have ended, but the message had been delivered, and this time Sarah had heard it. Ryan set his glass down with a sharp clack that echoed in the tense dining room, the sound cutting through the silence like an exclamation mark. He leaned slightly forward, his voice low and deliberate, each word carrying a weight that demanded attention. "Sarah, that's enough. You can't keep brushing this off like it doesn't matter." The sudden firmness in her younger brother's tone made Sarah flinch for a brief second. She blinked, caught off guard, but quickly tried to recover, forcing a thin smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ryan, you too, really? It was just the washer. Mine broke, and I thought using yours once wouldn't hurt anything. And I was watching your dog for free, remember? I didn't think it was a big deal." Emily's fingers tightened into her lap, nails pressing into her palms until it almost hurt. She forced herself to take a steady breath, but the tremor in her voice betrayed the storm of emotions building inside. "Not a big deal. Sarah, you call this coming into our home, using our things without permission, leaving a mess, breaking my mother's bracelet, and letting our dog get hurt. Not a big deal." Sarah tilted her head slightly, her brows knitting together. Her voice rose a little, defensive and clipped. "Emily, come on. You're blowing this way out of proportion. They're just little things. I helped you too by watching the dog. I didn't ask for anything in return. You're being way too strict about all of this." The phrase "too strict" landed on Emily like a spark in dry grass. She pushed her chair back and stood, the legs scraping against the floor with a sharp screech. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with a cold fire. Every word came out, measured and cutting, each one like a blade slicing through the air. "Little things. Do you even understand what those little things mean? That bracelet you broke, it's the only thing I have left from my mother. The only thing. And our dog, he was injured and terrified all night because of the chaos you brought into this house. You promised to watch him, but instead you turned our home into your personal hangout. You call that helping?" Sarah instinctively stepped back a fraction, her shoulders stiffening. Her eyes darted from Emily to Ryan, searching for support but finding none. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I honestly didn't think it was that serious," she said finally, her voice smaller now, though she tried to keep her chin lifted. Ryan stood as well, the chair sliding back quietly behind him. Normally calm and gentle, he now carried an unmistakable edge. his gaze locked on Sarah's, unwavering and sharp. It's not just, don't minimize what happened. You broke our trust. We asked you to watch the dog, nothing more. Instead, you treated our house like it was yours, used our appliances, damaged Emily's heirloom, and left our dog hurt and frightened. And now you're standing here blaming Emily for being too picky. Sarah, how can you possibly think that's okay? Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it again, her confidence faltering under Ryan's steady stare. It was rare, almost unheard of, for him to speak with such steel in his voice. The brother she had always known as patient and easygoing now stood unflinching, and it left her visibly unsettled. Emily drew in a slow breath, her hands trembling slightly before she clasped them together to steady herself. When she spoke again, her voice was firmer, steadier, carrying a quiet authority that filled the room. This isn't about a broken bracelet or a messy kitchen. It's about respect. It's about boundaries. You came into our home and treated it like it belonged to you. You didn't ask. You didn't think. And in doing that, you hurt us and you hurt our dog. That can't happen again. Sarah's shoulders sagged. She lowered her gaze to the table, her fingers knotting together so tightly her knuckles turned white. The defiance that had been flickering in her eyes moments earlier dimmed, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like guilt. Ryan stepped closer to the table, placing both hands flat against the wooden surface. His voice was calm but unyielding, each word landing like a quiet verdict. From now on, anything involving this house, even something as small as running a load of laundry, requires permission. No exceptions. These are our boundaries. If you can't respect them, you will not be allowed to watch the dog or use this house again. Is that clear? Sarah's lips parted, as though she might object, but no words came. After a long pause, she bit down lightly on her lower lip and gave a small, reluctant nod. Yes, I understand. Emily exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. Her eyes remained cool, but there was a flicker of relief that the truth was finally spoken, that the invisible line she had been guarding for so long was now drawn clearly in the open. I hope you do understand. This isn't about anger, Sarah. It's about respect. Without that, there can be no trust between us. And without trust, there's no relationship, family or otherwise. The room settled into a heavy silence. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, each beat marking the fragile new order that had just been established. Sarah stared down at her clasped hands, her shoulders rising and falling with a quiet, uneasy breath. She didn't argue, didn't offer excuses, only a small, almost imperceptible nod, the closest thing to an admission of guilt she could manage. In that long, quiet moment, all three of them understood what had shifted. Their family ties would remain, but something fundamental had changed. The easy trust of before was gone, replaced by firm, necessary boundaries. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't pleasant. But it was the only way forward if any shred of respect, any hope of reconciliation was to survive. The door clicked shut behind Sarah, and the house immediately sank into a heavy, almost sacred silence. The soft sound of the lock turning was barely audible, yet to Emily it felt like a decisive full stop and ending to the long days of tension and quiet endurance. She stood against the door for a moment, inhaling deeply, letting the tight knot in her chest slowly loosen. No more arguments. No more heavy breathing from Sarah. Lonely, the faint scent of herbal tea drifting from the kitchen, and the steady tick of the wall clock. Emily walked slowly to the sofa and lowered herself onto the cushions. The storm of emotions she had carried for days, anger, sadness, disappointment, seemed to seep out of her body all at once, leaving behind an aching exhaustion, but also a strange, liberating calm. She closed her eyes, listening to her heartbeat as it slowed, each thump a quiet reminder that she was safe now. In that stillness, a realization surfaced, though she knew today's confrontation might leave cracks in family ties. This was the first time she truly felt protected, not just by herself, but by Ryan, who had stood firmly by her side. Ryan joined her on the sofa, his warm hand sliding gently into hers, steady and unshakable. He didn't speak right away, simply tightening his grip as if to anchor her. When Emily finally opened her eyes and met his gaze, she found it strong, certain, but also filled with quiet love. "I promise," Ryan said softly, his deep voice deliberate and unwavering. "I won't let this happen again. We've set our boundaries, and she will have to respect them." Emily nodded faintly, her lips trembling slightly as the weight of his words sank in. There was still fatigue in her eyes, but somewhere behind it flickered the first glimmer of peace. "I know," she whispered. "Things might be tense with the family after today, but at least we don't have to stay silent anymore." Ryan gave her hand another firm squeeze, sealing the promise between them. Together, they leaned forward and opened the small notebook on the coffee table. Slowly and carefully, they began to write down a new set of rules, simple on the surface, but now vital. A shield to protect the serenity of their home. No one enters the house without explicit permission. No matter how close the relationship, no one uses appliances, rooms, or belongings without asking first. Every action, even small ones, must be communicated and approved in advance. Anyone who refuses to respect these rules will no longer be allowed to watch the house or borrow it for any reason. With each sentence committed to paper, Emily felt another layer of fog lift from her mind. The air in the room seemed clearer, lighter, as though the house itself was reclaiming its rightful breath, its own rhythm, free of intrusion and chaos. Her gaze drifted toward the small dog curled up in its new basket. Its fur was clean again, the little wound neatly bandaged, but those round dark eyes still held a shadow of fear. Emily bent down, gently stroking its head, as she whispered a quiet vow more to herself than to the dog. "No one will ever hurt this family again." Ryan slipped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close until her head rested against his chest. They sat like that for a long time, breathing together in the restored stillness. The house, once disrupted by conflict, now felt warm and whole again. But the true treasure wasn't the tidiness or the silence, it was the invisible wall of respect they had built. A hard-won lesson about protection, dignity, and the right to defend their own home. Emily tilted her head slightly against Ryan's shoulder, a faint but resolute smile curving her lips. Family tensions might linger, awkward gatherings might still come, but she knew now that peace had returned and, more importantly, she would never again allow herself to suffer in silence. In the quiet aftermath, Emily understood a truth she had long ignored. Family ties do not mean sacrificing one's peace. A family can only remain strong when every member respects each other's boundaries. And personal space. Love is not silent endurance. Love is the courage to say enough when those boundaries are crossed. That evening, Emily and Ryan didn't just protect their home, they protected their values. They proved to themselves and to each other that respect is the only foundation on which true family connection can survive and grow.